You forgot the first rule of remakes, Jill. Don't fuck with the original.
Hey everybody! Godzilla is coming to theaters, like the movie, not the actual creature, this Friday. And you know what that means?
A lot of heavy-handed symbolism in this review.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that. And it also means another episode of Don't F with the Original.
With Nicholas, I'm the video correspondent for Idiomatic.
And I'm Dimitri, editor-in-chief of Idiomatic.com and movie critic. For those of you who don't know, Don't F with the Original is the show where Nick and I take movies that are coming out that are remakes or sequels, and we check the original out and review it and speak about our expectations for the new movie.
Yeah.
And in this case, obviously, that means 1954's
Godzilla, yes.
Otherwise known as Godzilla, King of the Monsters in the US. Though, if you're going to watch this movie, and are you going to recommend it?
Yes,
yeah.
I recommend it.
I recommend it as well. The one caveat is do not check out the dubbed version. Do not check out Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Look for the subtitled version because they've changed it majorly. They've removed really important themes and plot lines, and they've added a white character to announce a lot of things. It's weird.
Well, I'd like to talk about that after we do this review of this. It'd be interesting. But on to the original instead.
Yes, directed by Honda Ijiro. For those of you who don't know, it's the story of a giant lizard attacking Japan, and Japan trying to figure out what to do with it. It ties into eventually the development of a new weapon called the Oxygen Destroyer.
Yeah, which is the only thing that they think will kill Godzilla and save Japan.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what it is. So what did you think of it?
It was very interesting. I like the story in general. Is very good. I would not recommend the movie for the special effects, honestly.
Oh God.
But it's much more of a story than just big monster show up, destroy. The army doesn't do it. Let's do something else, which is what I was expecting. No, you have the backstory of what's happening. Some old people are thinking that Godzilla is a myth, and he shows up, and we need to do this, and then you have people who want to deal with Godzilla very different ways in Japan. So it has a lot more levels than what I was expecting. Was just big fight between Godzilla and the army. There was a lot more to it, and I like that.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I was actually surprised that this movie, which I found very somber and very detailed in its sociological portrayal of Japan, if you will, to have turned into this franchise mostly known for its camp value.
Yeah.
If you will. Like, I was like, how did that movie become like one of those campy classics? Godzilla fights this monster and that monster. It's like that's not what the original movie is like at all.
I know.
It's like King Kong is more of a silly monster movie, and I would argue that it's not, but it's more of a silly monster movie than Godzilla is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked it, and I liked as well that it takes about 22 minutes before we actually see Godzilla.
Yeah.
And at first they're like, oh, was that a weapon? Like, did somebody attack us? Because it's a marine ship that's attacked at first.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, is this a nuclear weapon? Oh, is this a natural event? Like, it takes them forever to even figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
And I like that, actually, because what they suspect makes sense. Like, it wasn't, like, out of nowhere,
Yeah, it's true. Although 22 minutes, and that's enough. Show off the damn monster. The movie's called Godzilla.
Well, yeah, but keep in mind that Gojira it doesn't mean god of lizards the way Godzilla does.
Yeah.
So, they might not know what a Gojira is when they enter at the movie theater.
Interesting. We just had to ruin it with, by naming it exactly what it is in the title, in the translation.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
It's terrible. Worst translation ever.
Well, although, I mean, like, part of it is clever because it does sound a little bit like the Japanese name. And they made a little punny name with it. Fine, it's
Yeah.
clever, but it all shows you where the focus was when they translated it. They saw a silly monster movie, whereas the Japanese filmmakers, when they made this movie, they saw an opportunity to discuss some of the themes of what happened just 10 years ago in their history.
Yeah.
So you can see a little bit of like Japan sort of coming to terms with a nuclear tragedy,
Yeah.
and the Americans going like, whatever, monster. Which leaves a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, because the Americans are the ones who shot that
Yeah.
nuclear weapon at them.
But in a certain way, it's not like they shot the weapons out of the blue, you know? It's like, not one day, you know, it's like, hey, let's just bomb Japan for the kick of it, you know? So.
Yes and no, because one of the things that I feel is sort of not really... And let's talk about nuclear weapons. So this is going to be a very political episode, and I apologize for that if that's not what you're into, but that's what the movie is.
Let's just explain why we're going to nuclear weapons first, because basically Godzilla is awoken by a nuclear test to begin with. And also when you see the movie, when he enters, like when he attacks city, he basically shows up and basically out of nowhere, and he destroys everything. He disappears.
Yeah.
Basically, and it looks exactly, the ruins looks exactly like what you'd expect if an atomic bomb had hit. It's like all the ruins, everything's flattened, and
it looks like Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Exactly. You never saw it coming. It's basically he shows up, boom, destroyed, and then he leaves.
And traces of radiation.
Exactly. So it's basically, it is pretty much not even, you know, a hidden metaphor for basically, you know, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as you did, you know, and basically the fear of the nuclear weapon as, you know, from the Japanese side.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is a very, as you pointed out at the beginning of the episode, heavy-handed metaphor for some of the apprehensions and anxieties that the Japanese have over the use of nuclear energy and nuclear weapons in particular.
Yeah, I don't think there was nuclear energy back then yet, but
yeah, nuclear technology.
Yeah,
though.
there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel have concluded from this that Godzilla it represents the nuclear bomb, which he sort of does and doesn't, because the oxygen destroyer represents the nuclear bomb.
Okay.
You know, it's like hydrogen bomb, oxygen bomb. Come on, like it's the same fucking thing. It's not even subtle.
I guess.
And the whole question near the end of the movie becomes whether or not it would be ethical to get rid of Godzilla using the oxygen destroyer, which essentially is you put it in water and boils shit to annihilation, essentially is what it is. It looks really cheap and silly.
Yeah. It does. It's basically just like putting like, what do you call that, Pepto-Bismol, you know, in a glass, and because you have hardware. That's what it is. It's very cheap special effects all the way through, even when it's just human and you don't even even when it's just humans and not even with Godzilla, they go cheap all the way.
No, you're right. No, the special effects are really bad, to be perfectly honest. And it's like, it's not even like, signs of the times, but like this movie was made in 1950. No, even by 1954 standards, this is bad special effects. Yeah. I mean, Hollywood was way ahead in terms of special effects by that point.
Yeah. I mean, remember the worst Power Ranger episode you ever saw? It was better than that, honestly. You know,
But keep in mind, King Kong came out before Godzilla.
Yeah.
You look at King Kong, you look at Godzilla. Godzilla looks like shit, like in terms of special effects.
That is true.
You know?
Yeah.
But having said that, I like the story and everything. And what I like about it is that Godzilla isn't just simply a nuclear bomb that walks around. You know, there's people who say like, Godzilla is from our past. And then they reveal that, but Godzilla has also been a creature enhanced by nuclear energy. Yeah. So he's essentially the horrors of Japanese past accumulated into the nuclear explosion. That's what he is. So he's sort of the sins of Japan, if you will.
All right.
Taking place. And they're wondering what to do about it. And all these dilemmas are so interesting, because the first dilemma is whether or not to tell the public. Should we tell the public what's really happening, or should we lie about it to avoid a panic? Okay. And this is a really important conversation for the Japanese, because Japanese culture is very big on appearances. In Japanese culture, I don't remember the word for it, but there are two levels of truth. There's the truth of appearance, and there is the truth that is beneath the appearance.
Okay.
And both are always balanced in Japanese culture. So here you have these people trying to decide how to balance that. Should we tell the public about the sins of our past culminating into this giant nuclear monster destroying our city, or should we lie about it?
Okay.
And there's a big debate about it. And that's an important debate in a culture where appearance matter as much as internal, verifiable truth, if you will.
That's interesting.
And then they decide, fuck it, let's tell the people. And the guy who said, like, there's going to be a panic turns out to be wrong, because the Japanese people just reading in the newspaper is like, yeah, one more bullshit to deal with. And, like, that's the next scene in the train. They read in the papers, guy, like, yeah, our fucking government.
Of course.
And it's just, it's sort of like, okay, so there's no panic because people are so goddamn jaded. And that's also an interesting sociological comment about where Japan is at in relation to its own history.
That's interesting. Didn't see that.
And so it all culminates to whether or not to use the next nuclear weapon, and it's the idea is, do we eradicate our past, or do we try to study it? There's this old guy who's always like, well, like, stop trying to kill it. Let's study it to see what it is, what it can bring to us,
Okay.
what Japan can learn from it. And if you see Godzilla as a culmination of all of its mistakes, what the old guy is arguing is like, stop trying to bury the past to favor the appearance that Japan is okay again, and study how the hell we got to this point.
See, I did not see that, because I thought basically that Godzilla basically represented the fear of the atomic bomb. Not the atomic bomb itself, but the fear of it. Basically, the symbolism stopped there, because I didn't quite understand why he wanted to study, like, the fear of the atomic bomb. So I just pictured he just wanted to study Godzilla as any good scientist would want to. Kind of a little silly. It'd be like me, an astronomer, saying, you know, there's this giant meteorite that's going to fall in Canada, but just let it fall. I want to study it instead of, you know, stopping it. So I just thought that character was really weird. Even if it's the symbolism, now I understand, is there, he still seems off as a character, because Godzilla is killing people in his country, and he's like, let's not try and kill it, let's study it instead while it's killing all these people. With the symbolism, he sort of works, but as a character, he fails completely for me.
To the movie's credit, they do address it. They don't try to hide it. It was like, the old man is right, we should study our sins. No. Studying our sins and letting them happen and devastate our society, not favoring appearances, has its consequence. It's killing people.
Yeah, okay.
You know?
Alright.
And you have the younger characters who are a little bit more proactive about preserving life today than the old guy who's a little bit more preoccupied with what has been done in his lifetime. We're like, hey, people are dying. Let's do something. You know? And then you have the scientist who has the next nuclear weapon but doesn't want to use it because he's aware of what happened last time.
Yeah.
And doesn't want it. And then you have the fiancée character. She's a really important character.
She's one of the strongest characters in the movie, you know.
And one of the smartest. Because she makes a decision. It's like, okay, I promise not to tell anyone. Oh, fuck it. People are dying. I'm going to tell people.
Okay.
And she's not wrong. Like, you understand why she does that. People are dying.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of the dichotomy and the balance that Godzilla, the movie, Gojira, I should say, the movie is trying to explore, is that where do you draw the line between maintaining appearances so that our society can thrive and move past the mistakes that we've done in our past, and ignoring our past in the process, and therefore putting ourselves in a situation where we might repeat the same mistakes.
Okay.
Or acknowledging all the things that we've done bad, study them so that we don't make them again, at the cost of actually moving forward as a society.
All right.
And that's what I thought was so interesting and so so powerful about this movie, and a little bit depressing, because it's a dilemma that they present to you, and it's like, fuck, there's no way out. That's a really hard question to answer.
Yeah, I guess not knowing the culture that much, I didn't quite get all those levels of, you know, what was happening. I mostly thought the guy with the new extra weapon, he was just basically saying, you know, I have this new device,
Mm-hmm.
that I want, I want to use for good, Unlike another country that used that device for bad, I, as a Japanese person, will only use it for good, and I thought that was like, yeah, it felt a little, kind of bad for me hearing him
But
say that.
but I don't feel that's what the movie's doing
Yeah,
at all.
I know.
That's an interesting way of looking at it because
Because basically, if you know a little bit story about World War II, there were three countries that were trying to develop the atomic bomb: Germany, the United States, and Japan. So it's like basically whoever got it first was going to use it, and
hopefully not. But yeah, that certainly looked that way.
yeah,
and ended up that way as well.
ended up that way. But I'm pretty sure to save from defeat, Germany would have used it, and Japan as well.
Yes, no, you're right. You're right. Because the thing is that the Japanese emperor was batshit crazy. For those of you who don't know, Japan did not want to participate in World War II, even like in terms of its invasion of Asian countries. Okay, this is where I get into a little bit of history and then get a little bit of politics, and you need to sort of discuss where Godzilla stands and why it's an interesting movie and why your interpretation, I think I can debunk it and say that's not that can't be the way that it was meant. The thing about it is that there are three awful major crimes against humanity that have been committed in World War II. There have been a lot more, but there are three that are in the top three in all of human history.
Yeah.
The first one is the one that we always talk about, and in fact, sadly, the only one we talk about. Number one spot, Hitler committing near genocide of Jews, Gypsies, etc., and invading Europe. That's evil, dude. There's no one's questioning that.
Yeah.
Number two is actually Japan's crimes. Because the shit they did in other countries, such as Vietnam, part of China, is horrendous. They would invade it and then kill people, make walls out of babies' heads. The crimes against humanity that Japan committed during those years is almost as bad as Hitler's.
Yeah.
And then the third, and that's the one that I wish we'd take more ownership of, is somebody launched a nuclear bomb.
Two, actually.
Two, yeah. Nagasaki and Hiroshima, you're right.
Honestly, the first one, you can kind of debate the first one, okay? Yes, maybe no, maybe you want to save Americans' life, whatever. The second one was completely used. It's like, come on, you already blew one, you showed your, what kind of weapon you have. Did you have to drop the second one that fast afterwards? That I can completely agree that the second one, completely uncalled for.
There was a possibility for diplomacy. Two bombs were launched instead, and two bombs that would have repercussions on not just human lives and a lot of human lives, including American POWs, by the way.
Yeah,
and that's something that people forget. There were a diplomatic solution would have allowed the Americans to recuperate these soldiers that bravely fought for their country.
Yeah.
And then they launched them. And here's the thing about it that's a little bit sad as well, is that, and that's the part that in the West we don't hear about, is that the Japanese emperor was batshit fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And that was a totalitarian government. They kidnapped people who opposed the emperor's worldview and tortured them. There was a thought police in Japan. This was not a free country.
Yeah.
And the Japanese people, regardless of that, started protesting against the atrocities that the Japanese emperor was committing in the name of Japan. They bravely protested in public, knowing that there was a thought police in their country, ready to incarcerate them forever or kill them. And we bombed these people, because we bombed civilians.
Exactly. That might have a problem too. That those cities had no military value, or very little. Or as opposed to, if you bomb like a giant military base, at least, it's the military. Because there were two groups of people. I can't call them groups because one of them is one person that were for this, were the emperor and the military. The military, which was basically kind of, had the ear of the emperor as well. They were completely for and way we can totally control the world and everything.
Even then, the general in charge of evaluating whether it was a wise move to attack the U.S. concluded that it was not. And then the emperor took his report, removed all the pages proving that it was not, and used the rest as proof that here's how we're going to do it.
So, he was against attacking the U.S. does not mean he was not against going to other countries.
Oh yeah, no. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
No. But I mean, like even within the military, there was it was a more nuanced and complex situation.
But still, the military, was sort of for this war, as opposed to the civilian population was apparently completely against this kind of crap.
Yeah, and the military heads, I should say, because to send the soldiers there to do these atrocities, they would put drugs, such as opium, I believe, into their food supplies to drive them nuts and continue fighting.
Wow.
So even the ground soldiers, the ground military, were starting to go like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Which is normal because it's insane.
Yeah. So yeah, if that, honestly, it may be a personal opinion, but you say three atrocities, 1 and 2 are kind of on top, and you have a distant third at this point, for the amount of people.
Yes, but it was an unprecedented third.
Yes,
it's
exactly. Yeah.
And the reason I'm mentioning that is not to sort of compare in any way. It's not to criticize in any way what the U.S. did. They did what they did in the context of war against two tyrant nations.
Yeah.
So it's in the past. It happened. It was made in the context of war. Why I bring it up is in question of taking ownership of what we do, because American history has not taken ownership of the launch of these two bombs, and now we have people like Sarah Palin saying the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a nuclear bomb is a good guy with a nuclear bomb, in reference not to owning nuclear weapons, which would be a fair argument, but in reference to launching them, which is insanity.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you don't take ownership of your history. Why I'm mentioning this is because Godzilla sort of, as a movie, sort of reflects how Japan feels about it. And what's interesting about it is that they take ownership of their sins, where they view Godzilla as a product of their doing, not the US's doing.
Okay.
There's a really important line where it goes like, only Japan should handle this situation. And only Japan should handle the situation because it is our sins. They view the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima as a direct result of their actions as a nation. They don't blame the US for it. And you will see, there has never been in Japan history following those bombings any sort of animosity of like, oh, we're going to get the US back. They take ownership of that.
Yeah.
And that's not something that other countries have always done, especially in reference to World War II. Like, if you take Italy, if you watch Italian World War II movies, they're always like, oh no, Italy was cool. It was just our perverts that joined Hitler. No. Italy was an ally of Hitler. Italy was part of the Axis.
Yeah. And I've even, heard from, some friends that, talking about Germany, that apparently nobody in Germany liked Hitler. And I every time I hear that, it's like, nobody in Germany liked Hitler. Well, maybe a few of them. I was like, no, it took more than a few people to get that thing going, I know there was propaganda and kind of brainwashing with that, but there were more than a few people who liked Hitler. It's always like, well, that happened, but it's not really our fault, And I see what you're going there.
Yeah, that's it. And I understand, like, to a certain degree, that's sort of a psychological and cultural phenomenon that happens to allow culture to move on and be able to progress. And that's an important thing. So it's just a defense mechanism. But at the same time, I think the movie Godzilla makes an important point that's like, but when you do that, when you just want to eradicate the Godzilla monster in your past and your culture, aren't you not dooming yourself to repeat the same thing?
Yeah.
And so when you say, like, you interpreted the movie in terms of, like, oh, we're not going to do like that other country, I don't think that reflects Japanese culture at all at the time. They were very, very in a state of, like, what have we done to ourselves?
Okay. I didn't know that. Again, about the culture. And also, maybe it's not... You're talking about kind of generalizing over a whole society, though.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe some people, felt that, well, if, for example, if we had had the bomb, we would have never done that or something like that. And maybe, the person that felt like that made a movie. You never know. It's
yes, but the movie, like, I'm taking evidence from the movie.
Yeah, I know.
It says, like, the movie explicitly said, Godzilla is our problem. He comes from our past.
Yeah.
We should study him instead of just burying him, essentially. Yeah. And the dilemma of, like, oh, should we use this weapon or not? Oh my God! It's they take ownership of the problem. They don't say, we're going to be better than that other country. They never mention other countries.
So, I mean, when you start trying to make it for an American audience by translating it and adding a white character in there, how did that turn out? That doesn't seem like it would work out very well.
It's awkward.
What was the role of the white guy in the movie?
He was a journalist who
Okay.
was so he was expositing a lot of what's going on instead of the Japanese radio.
He couldn't appear with any other actors. That would have looked so phony.
Yeah, no,
especially
he's
back
just
then.
cut in. Like, he's shot in their own set and they cut him in there.
That is terrible.
It's really awkward, and a lot of the substance, a lot of the debate about what we should do about the Godzilla monster in terms of what that represents for the Japanese people has just been completely cut off because it's not about the giant monster.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, like Godzilla, King of Monsters. Don't watch that. It's terrible.
And then another question. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. Okay, so basically Godzilla represented what you said, atomic bomb, what we bring on ourselves. How did that become all of a sudden Japan is awesome in the later movies?
I know, right? I don't understand that either. It is mystifying that this series became like this thing of camp value extravaganza, this goofy movie series.
Yeah.
But it started off so somber and smart and interesting. And I can only assume that the same thing that happens in Hollywood happened in Japan, which is like, let's make some money, yo.
All right, sequelitis.
Yeah, exactly.
Before there was sequelitis. Interesting. And now they're bringing it back again?
Yeah. That's a lot of fish.
Oh, my God. Yes, it is.
Matthew Broderick should never lead an action film. I'm sorry. It's not that I dislike the actor. I think he's a fine actor for certain roles, but headlining an action film? No. Bad Broderick.
Yep. So you want to discuss just a little bit the American remake, the original in the 1990s?
Yeah, the 1990s Roland Emmerich Godzilla with Ferris Bueller there. I don't hate it nearly as much as everybody else does. I would never recommend the movie. It is not a good movie, but it is not an awful movie by any means.
I just think it's weird if you're going to pay for the name of Godzilla. I would use Godzilla, and not something that somewhat looks like it, but doesn't,
Well, he does still look like a giant dinosaur, which is sort of the idea.
Okay, that's just the thing, just the dinosaur, so we'll call him Godzilla. You think the name recognition was just worth it instead of
In fairness, I actually think that they did try to adapt Godzilla. I mean, Roland Emmerich is a director who actually has political opinions. It just he just happens to communicate them in a very stupid way.
Okay.
But you get the sense of him that he's a staunch liberal who really cares about the environment and things like that.
Okay.
And so you only need to look at movies like The Day After Tomorrow and things like that. Like, you can see where he comes from. Or like my favorite movie of his, like, I kid you not, White House Down, is fantastic.
Okay.
It's
Interesting.
fantastic. It's Die Hard in the White House.
Wow.
It's fantastic. It's
Cool.
really funny, but it's super, super liberal. Like, it's super, super liberal. Like, the black president that our hero is trying to protect is, okay, he's black, so people think Obama automatically, but he's actually much more like Carter, a pacifist who wants to go through his presidency without firing a single bullet. Like, he's more like, and that's what makes him so important and precious.
That's spectacular.
Yeah. And so that's Roland Emmerich for you. And I find that he did sort of adapt Godzilla to his own political views, where it was more about the environment. So it's the same concept where the Godzilla used to live under the sea quite happily, and his ecosystem got altered, so he comes out. So I think he generally tried to make an adaptation of the Godzilla story.
Okay.
And then, because he's Roland Emmerich, sort of presented it in the dumbest way imaginable.
Yeah. The Siskel and Ebert characters were the dumbest thing I've ever seen in a movie ever.
Yeah.
Anyway, the new one.
The new one. Look, we saw the trailer together, as we usually do.
Yeah.
And it's a trailer that's pretty clever at telling you, look, it's a Godzilla movie, and telling you very little else.
Yeah. There's some parachuting involved.
Which is gorgeous, though. Like, that, the scene, like, the way it's composed, the cinematography on it is gorgeous. I thought it was, wow, that's really good looking.
Yeah. And then you see a blurry monster. Like, okay.
Which you don't want to reveal your monster in your trailer if your special effects are not completed, if you want to have the Jaws effect. So I completely respect that. My worry about it is, though, what are you going to link it to?
Global warming.
Well, that would be the right way to go. But then,
what's the other big thing nowadays? Terrorism.
No, but that's you laugh, but that's what I'm a little bit afraid of, because the trailer shows military people going down there, right? So military, war, terrorism. And like when Americans think of devastation in their own land, what do they think of? 9/11.
Yeah.
Reasonably so.
You saw shots of buildings with giant holes in them.
Yeah.
It's like, what punched a hole in the buildings? And then it's like, no, you're right. When you think about it, I'm kind of worried now.
Yeah, I'm afraid of it. I mean, like, okay, the cast looks really good, like, and you have a whole bunch of people. Elizabeth Olsen is in this thing, and I always have time for her. So, there's potential just in terms of the cast. The special effects looks really good. The cinematography look good, but and in fairness, I mean, with a trailer like this, we're not told anything, which again is not a criticism, just a statement.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I am afraid. I'm tired of 9/11 allegories, especially since filmmakers are shoving them everywhere where they don't belong. And fucking Star Trek Into Darkness was a 9/11 allegory. I'm like, Star Trek? Really, people? Star Trek?
Yeah.
The Gene Roddenberry Utopia is a place where you want to shove a 9/11 allegory?
Yeah.
So, enthusiastic about the general talent involved, a little bit concerned about what the potential themes are going to be.
Okay. Yes, fair enough.
All right, so next week we are talking about X-Men Saving the Day. That's a reference to Pride of the X-Men, the 1989 pilot animation thing.
But we're not reviewing that one. We're reviewing actually the X-Men, the first movie.
Yeah, the Bryan Singer movie.
Yeah.
Until then, if you want to write us, share with us your love of giant monsters, you can write us at mail@idiomatic.com or post a comment at idiomatic.com. We are also on Twitter @idiomatic, Facebook, iTunes. If you could write us an iTunes review and or like us on Facebook, it would help us get the support to continue generating content for you. Otherwise, I will have no choice but to disrupt Nick's ecosystem and force him out of his basement.
That will never happen. Ever.